The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog and join the Progressive Army. And now, ladies and gentlemen,
you're now about to witness the truth.
It's the Benjamin Dixon Show.
Everybody, welcome to the Wednesday night edition of the Benjamin Dixon Show. I am your hostess with the mostest for the evening, Anoa Changa. I'm filling in for Ben tonight. You know, self-care, had to take a break, and you know, your girl's always willing to step up to prime time to hang out with you guys. Hope you're doing well this evening. As usual, so much is very busy news cycle. If you guys, are interested, if you want to call in, you can call in. The number 678-810-0089. Folks who tried to call in to the Way with Anoa last night, shout out, thank you so much. But definitely taking your calls at least up until about 9:30 before I do a kind of a piece, going to try and do one of my rants tonight. We'll see what happens. But gonna just jump right into it, going to hit it heavy and keep it moving. So stay with me, stay tough. Going to get heavy and going to dig deeper into the issue of race in America, like I said, a little bit later on in this show for this evening. And yeah, the Black girl's going to talk about race tonight some more. I talked about it last night, talked about it with Ben. I got a podcast that's about to drop. If you guys haven't checked out my website already, check out thewaywithanoa.com. Also, most definitely check out some of the wonderful articles that is being done on progressivearmy.com from our team of writers. We got a great team here, So if you got a chance to watch the Louisa project ahead of me, definitely check out, like, and subscribe, and definitely share those videos. Louisa project is geared towards focusing on education. Education is one of those things that is often, we talk a lot about it. We know it is important and crucial to moving forward in our society, but at the same time, it's something that's often overlooked and not given the attention and meaningful conversation that it so desperately is needed. As I talked about last night, one of the things that I really felt, and this was, evidenced very, very clearly by some commentary from Nina Turner, the conversation about race that was had during the debate, it focused solely on race and crime. There was no conversation about, the way employment, investment, development, education, those aspects, kind of play into those things. So we're gonna have a little bit. We're gonna get a little real a little later on, but want to talk about some news right now. I know there's been so much going on in terms of the debate and that type of stuff. We didn't really get into there have been two tragic shootings, mass shootings that happened this week. The first happened in Houston earlier in the week, over the weekend. A lawyer snapped, I guess, and shot up, basically pulled a submachine gun, I think it was, out of his fancy car, and shot a bunch of people up. And he was in Nazi uniform. From friends, from an article I was reading earlier, they talked about how he had actually collected Nazi paraphernalia. What's interesting is that while he was in college, he actually helped start a Jewish fraternity. But they said that it was they always found it odd that he had collected Nazi paraphernalia. I've heard that people do that. I really don't understand. But he was in a Nazi uniform at the time of the shooting. And apparently there were some issues with his law firm, and he had been, they parted ways. So there was a convo I was a part of on Twitter about how, this wasn't labeled an act of terrorism or anything like that. I mean, let's just be real. It's domestic terrorism. Whether there's a political purpose behind it or not, when someone uses certain imagery to invoke fear and just attacks, wildly the population like that, that's terror, right? And the conversation was like, well, he's white, so and someone remarked, that they had read someplace that he was Indian American, and I actually did see a piece earlier today that buried in it. It said he was born in India and had come here later on for school. Not that the race of the shooter should not matter, but we do so often see that there are certain scenarios where there's certain narratives when people come from certain places, whether they're, people of color from here in the United States, or if they're Middle Eastern descent. In many instances, they are labeled and categorized in a certain way. So that was one case that happened this week. And then just today in South Carolina, there's a shooting at an elementary school. A teenage boy, I believe they said he was armed with a handgun, shot 2 students. Thankfully there were no fatalities at the school, but apparently he killed his father before going into to elementary school. And it was saying that I wasn't clear from the 2 articles, the 2 pieces I tried to, get as much information as possible, to be able to talk to you all about it coherently, but it wasn't clear whether or not it was his school itself or just another school. But it said that he had actually been expelled from school for having a hatchet previously. So, there's a lot of conversation about gun control and gun violence and things of that nature, but we continue to have this uptick in these incidences. And while I agree that there is a need for common sense gun reform in this country, at the same time, we do have these occurrences. It's a lot bigger than just passing some legislation. We have the issue of culture. We have an issue with the way people and the value of life and how people interact. I'm not going to say that I'm not going to necessarily say this is a mental health problem, because I don't want to disparage the real struggles and difficulties that challenges that people actually go through. But at the same time, there's something more than just we need more laws or better laws, because in some cases, the things that are being proposed would not prevent any of these 2 incidences. So that was, I try, there's no way to kind of build up to either one of those stories, but I did think they were at least important to mention. But as we move forward, we have seen an increase, but at the same time, we have seen an erosion in culture to the point where it just seems like people are not getting, whether it's needed services or what the case may be, but there's definitely something going on in American society as a whole that is making this more prevalent, it seems. And I think our obsession with guns, like I said, it's a cultural issue, I think, as much, or if not more so, than it is a legal issue. But there are certainly places with lax gun laws. I mean, whether or not the father actually, because I know, like I said, having lived in West Virginia, before, I've talked about this before. I know plenty of friends who own weapons, all types of weapons, and whose children, even when they're younger, are familiar with how to use them, with proper upkeep. So I know a lot of folks who do gun safety with their kids and their families and stuff. But yet and still, we still see, and I mean, and again, I don't know that this necessarily happened in this person's household or not, but we still see a rise in these incidences, and I don't know what correlation, if any, there is, but it's something that we need to actually have real discussions about, and not just writing people off as being crazy gun nuts. Like, I think that's rather dismissive. Caller, thank you for calling in. What's your name? Where are you calling from? And what's your comment or question?
My name is Isha, and I'm quickly calling
Isha.
Just because I kind of wanted to just put one quick idea in your head, is that I wonder if there's a situation of desperation or hopelessness caused by income inequality and poverty in itself. Like, is there research on whether or not that leads to increased gun violence?
Interesting. I think that there are definitely, I guess, kind of going along with the culture, my idea about culture, I do think that there are definitely certain stressors and pressures that are facing families in the country today, maybe in a certain way, that maybe there's a breakdown. Like, when I talk about the breakdowns of culture, there's a breakdown in our families and community safety nets as well. So maybe even if we're in a situation, because I don't like with the child today, for example, the teenage boy, I don't really know much anything about his background. I don't know that anything's really been released since he's a minor, but so we can only speculate if any of that plays into it. But there has certainly been, if we look over the last 20 years in terms of the breakdown in families and communities, It makes me think of this book I read in college, Bowling Alone. Like, we talk about the erosion of American society over the last 50, 60 years. You know, my parents, I don't know if anyone else's parents do this, but they always talked about how back in the day, you know, if you went outside, anybody on the block would look out for you, or, you know, any adult would come after, you know, and we don't really have that same sense of cultural responsibility, community responsibility in the same way. People aren't supported. And a lot of people, there's a lot of stress, tension, and pressure, again, whether it's from economic factors or other social cultural factors that people are dealing with. So again, I'm not trying to explain away or rationalize, but there is something that's happening more than just gun ownership itself. I mean, because I'm personally, I don't believe that owning a gun makes you more prone to just go out and snap and kill somebody. There's something else going on there that, you know, we can litigate and legislate all we want to, but it's not necessarily going to address what we're seeing. Because if people want to get their hands on something, they're going to make it happen. And how do we, though, as a country, as a community, begin to address those situations and issues? It's going to take something more. So I do appreciate your comment, your point, that maybe there's something else factored in there. With the lawyer, I don't really know. I can't even begin to imagine what is his choice. I know there was some possibility of he had some funny money dealings with his firm. But why he snapped, I'm not really sure. But I mean, I think there's something deeper than just people are, you know, quote unquote nuts. I think, like I said, I think just writing people off like that, I think, is disparaging. But thank you for calling in, definitely. So yeah, kind of switching gears a little bit, a little government news. So talked about the possibility of government shutdown. They have reached a stopgap agreement on a stopgap measure that will keep the government funded through December. I think it's December 9th. And then they'll have to come up with something else again. Like I said, you know, but previously, I really did not think that this was going to go to the 9th at the late last minute, because neither party, it's an election cycle. We have an election happening in less than 41 days or something like that. Neither party would want to be blamed for shutting down the government. It's just bad optics, right? Ted Cruz can bahoo all he wants to about how it's not real money lost, blah, blah, blah. But it just looks poor on who can actually govern. And Congress has such a abysmally low approval rating anyway. So they came to an agreement today to go ahead. You know, part of this funding, because as you guys may already know, Congress has been dragging its feet on funding for Flint, as well as on funding to combat the Zika virus. And I mean, they've been dragging, you know, for months now on both, if not longer. And the funding measure had funding for the Zika virus, but it did not include anything for Flint. You know, Republicans are like, yeah, we'll touch that later. So when I had last read, either first thing this morning or late last night, was that Democrats had actually threatened, when I first saw the shutdown, Democrats had actually threatened that, you know, they would not support, you know, all the Democrats, and I think it was 10 Republicans, voted against the stopgap measure in the Senate unless there was a provision for funding for Flint. As you guys know, as you should know, the Flint water crisis has been going on. I believe it's 2 years. When I did the math earlier today, I think it's been 2 years, 5 months, and like 4 days or something like that. 2 years, 5 months, 4 days without clean, potable, you know, basic water. It's still not right. Over 2 years. And people, I mean, basic, you know, this is a basic human right. You know, water is life. We see what's happening, you know, the protests that have been going on out in North Dakota, the Dakota Access Pipeline. Water is life. It's not just, you know, bless the maker and his waters. God throwing my little doom quote there. Water is vital. Like, unless you have gone without water, and not like, oh, boil water advisory, boil your water for 24 hours, but like, unless you have not been able to use water at all, like, you cannot imagine not just the anxiety, the stress, the pressure. Like, it is hard raising a family, running a household on bottled water. I know I did it for several months when I lived in West Virginia prior to moving to Atlanta, Georgia, when we had the West Virginia water crisis after a chemical spill. And that pales in comparison to what families in Flint and there are many other impacted communities around the country. So with the government shutdown, you know, I was as an employee, who would have been infected, I was a little like, oh, here we go again with these people. But I was, on the flip side, I was proud to see folks taking a stand to help people, right? Because this would have actually been something to help people, actually to get money to actually do something for Flint. Because Flint has been struggling. Hillary went there. It's like, oh, yes, I'm going to save you. Bernie went there and set up shop, and they all went there and everybody talked and all this big talk, and still nothing has happened. President Obama flew in and hugged Little Miss Flint. Donald Trump went in there, and we've all seen it. If you have not seen the picture, you got to look it up. The picture of Little Miss Flint with Donald Trump, poor baby. Look like an advertisement for Stranger Danger. She looks so. Oh, caller, how you doing? Where are you calling from? What's your name and what's your comment or question?
Oh, hey, no, this is Bryce.
Hey, Bryce, how are you?
Doing good. So I wanted to talk about the Flint situation because I was listening
yeah. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah. I listened to the Young Turks about it, and they were saying how there was I guess for Flint they did some type of funding for it, but it was something really small enough and really that's going to be substantial. And it's just we waste so much money in this country. It's it's not even funny. We waste money on so much stupid stuff, and we can't get water. We can't fix roads. We can't, do things that, will really help us out as a country when we spend all this money wastefully. And obviously, we do need to vote and put people in that would definitely change it. But then the establishment always seems to kind of, get in the way. Obviously, Bernie's the number one option. But what I guess my question is, what do you think needs to be done as we head to 2020, and no matter who wins presidency-wise, that I guess can really fix this problem, because it's not getting better, it's only getting worse.
Thank you. I appreciate you for calling in, Bryce. I haven't gotten to talk to you in a while, so that was pretty cool. But going forward, and again, this ties into the government shutdown. We have had, and we started having these increasing issues with a entrenched, barely acting Congress. They've been acting like a bunch of 5-year-olds for 6, 7, 8 years now, almost. I'm refusing to do anything. That's why they're almost in single digits in terms of their approval rating. It's it's in the teens, I believe, percentage wise. It's the lowest I'm thinking here in history since they started tracking that type of thing. And what do I think needs to happen is I really do think there's a pretty sweet video earlier today from Jesse Williams. Doesn't really bother me. Who was it? Was it Joss Whedon that did it? But Jesse Williams did a video about voting, right? National Voter Registration Day was, I believe, yesterday. And what I love about this video with Jesse Williams is it did not specify that you need to vote for a particular party, that you need to register a specific way. It just said register. And I think that's such a powerful and great message, because he goes on to explain, and I wasn't going to talk about the video, I was going to write about it, but I'm going to talk about it real quick because I think it ties into Bryce's question about what can we do going into 2020. Register to vote. Register to vote. It don't matter if you vote in Green Party, Democrat, Republican, Libertarian. It doesn't matter if you are voting. And I'm being real right now, right? Register to vote, like that most basic, because one thing Jesse broke it down, this is so true. You can't, and we talk a lot about the criminal justice system. We talk about a lot of the disparities in race and mistreatment and how we don't have people who think like us making decisions or who understand the struggle or whatever the case may be. Register to vote, because otherwise you can't sit on a jury. Like he says, like he breaks down the video, local and state elections are so important to so many aspects of our life. Like the Flint situation, we're talking about Flint right here, and the government shutdown and the federal government doing funding. Yes, when Americans are in such dire straits and the states have failed families and communities, I do personally believe the federal government should step in and make it right. What is done to the state government? They figure out what we figure out, but I do believe that should happen, because this is no fault of these families and communities. It's not okay. It's not okay that we have children bathing in water that is not right. It's not okay that we have had small children that now may have long-term difficulties because of the exposure to toxins in their water. I'm a little pissed about this issue right now, not just so much because of Flint, but because the Chemical Safety Board just released the draft report from the West Virginia water crisis, 2 years after investigation. I'll get that to that in a few minutes. But what Jesse was saying in his videos is real short videos, real slick, it's really good. I like it, it's poignant. But there's so many aspects of our life that is tied to how you're registered to vote and how you engage in civic society around you. School boards, depend upon, who the dog catcher is, judges. If you're looking at on a state and local level, if you're someplace where your judges are elected, one of my girls from Indiana, she was telling me that I think there was actually a New York Times piece about this, her same county, Indiana, not too long ago, but there are like 7 judges. They're all Republican incumbents. They're running unopposed and nobody ever runs against them. So not only do people, we need people to run for election, right? But we also need people, if someone's running, like with Bob McCulloch and Ferguson, he was unopposed in the general, but someone ran against him in the primary and people did not vote. Okay? Like voting is not the end all be all. It is not a panacea, but it does a whole damn lot towards decision making and providing opportunity in our communities. Like we're talking about city council decision making. Like we got a situation here with our city council where the mayor blocked funding for this area right by my house. That was like several years in the making to get this road access fixed for this new shopping development that's going to bring economic development, blah, 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 to our area. And even though the funds have been earmarked for this project, city council passed it, all this other stuff, our knucklehead mayor tried to veto it. It's getting worked out and stuff now, but this type of stuff matters. Like you need to pay attention to who is making the decisions for your community. Who is sitting on these boards, right? If you're in a larger city where you have, housing and development corporations and things like that, who is sitting on the committees to make the decisions about where development and dollars go? We need people who will support and think and care about us. How does that happen? We have to vote for them. So going into 2020, I most definitely think and believe that one of the biggest things we can do is make sure people are registered to vote. And not just make sure that people are registered to vote, to make sure that people who are registered are voting. Now, I do not believe in telling anybody how to vote. That is between you and the voting booth. And if whoever you pray to, if you pray, or your maker, or whatever however you consider it, your mama, whatever you think of that you accountable to, you know what I'm saying? Like I got my personal opinions and what I think, people should do. But at the same time, at the end of the day, I respect you for making the choice that you make for your own life, but I definitely think that we need to make sure and engage in civic engagement and civic education over the next 4 years to talk about the issues that are affecting our communities. So back to this government shutdown, because I think that's one of the crucial things that we need to do going into 2020, talking about the issues and helping to develop, because we need that cadre of leadership going forward. You know what I'm saying? To make to move the needle so we can break this cycle, this incremental change BS that we've been all dealing with for like the last 30, 40, 50 years. I mean, 35 years for me, but some of y'all. No, I'm just joking. But with the shutdown, there was a meager agreement reached. Democrats, they because they don't want to be blamed. They don't want to be blamed either. But at the same time, I was really hoping to see like we really get some teeth in the real. But Flint has been basically set to languish and wait a little while longer, in the sake of compromise. I understand the purpose of compromise. I understand I understand logically why people make decisions and negotiate the way we do. I don't necessarily always like it because it's way past time for justice for Flint, Michigan. So if y'all know anyone out there from Flint, anyone who's been working and organizing in Flint, whatever, please send them our way or shoot me or Ben contact information, because this is I said it was an American, disgrace. Someone else said it was a human atrocity. It absolutely is, because like I said, water is crucial. Water is crucial. And the fact that, you don't know what might happen if you bathing your kids and just bathing your kids, right? You don't know what might happen, you know what I'm saying? Like, can you imagine going to fix even if you're using a filter, if you can afford the fancy filters, right? Like, can you imagine think back to 2 years ago. Think back to when this really became a big issue that people were even aware of. You got moms making bottles for their babies, right? Mixing formula. You got people showering and bathing their children, right? You got kids making themselves, like my son did when we had the water crisis. You got kids making themselves hot cocoa after school or whatever on a Saturday morning or whatever. You got folks boiling. I mean, like, all of this stuff absolutely matters. And the powers that be, they so busy trying to save a nickel and a dime here and there. But look at the governor you got. Right? Look at the governor. Look at these different Republican governors and these folks who are taking over our state houses and local level, policies. We got to do something to get these seats back in the hands of people who actually believe in legislating and leading and governing for the good of the people and not for the select private few who might make a few bucks here and there off of something. Because that's really what ends up happening there. You got a lot of situations where some company either didn't do something they were supposed to do, they wanted to cut corners and make some money, or you got some state bureaucrats someplace that's trying to cut corners. And that's a problem. So going forward, that's what we need to be thinking at going into 2020. We need people to be active and engaged. Democracy, paraphrasing Jesse Williams, democracy is not an act, it's a job. It's not just some amorphous concept that just exists. It's work. It's like a marriage. It's work. It takes time. It takes energy. It takes nurturing and care. It's struggle. You know what I'm saying? It might be blood, sweat, and tears, but it's worth it. And we work too damn hard to get here for folks to pull out the rug from underneath us. So yeah, that was, so the government shutdown has been avoided. I don't get furloughed. Other folks don't get furloughed. Yay, us. And it really actually is stressful. I had people saying to me before when we had the other shutdown, which was ushered in by Ted Cruz, part of the reason why I think he's a psychopath. Before people were like, well, last time this happened, we got paid. The other infamous shutdown was back when Gingrich was Speaker of the House. I guess allegedly, story goes, he was upset because Bill Clinton snubbed him on Air Force One, allegedly. Then all of a sudden there was a shutdown. And it was over the holidays. It was over the Christmas and New Year's holiday, that time period. So it really messed a lot of people up. And they ended up getting the back pay and stuff. But that's still stressful. I was just talking as we were preparing, to try and fill in for Ben tonight. I was just talking with some of my PA brothers. And what we were talking about is many families in America are, I think it's like 2 paychecks away from being homeless or something like that. Like despite the fact that we have people who are quote unquote middle class, we have a lot of hardworking families and people out there. A lot of people, missing a paycheck, let alone 2, is dire. It is so dire for our families and our communities. Even if you're not somebody with a family, if you're an older worker, it doesn't matter. Like people need their money when it's coming in. And some folks will be like, because we did get back pay, and people were like, well, you end up getting like vacation time. That's not vacation, because this is what you don't understand about a furlough, right? You get furloughed. You get no notice. You get like a day. You get no notice. And then if you were like what happened to us with my agency last year, we actually got recalled. So we got bumped up to essential employees. So we got recalled after I think like 6 days or something like that. So we had to work on an IOU. So we had to work on an IOU until they decided to pass a measure, because Congress, it's not automatic. Congress has to choose to pay us. Now, mind you, Congress, these assholes are essential workers. Ain't nothing essential about what the hell they've been doing. They have to vote to make themselves non-essential. They have to vote to not get paid. So if these jerks don't do their damn job and pass a budget, they have to then vote to make sure that they don't get paid during a shutdown. So you cause the problem, you instigate the situation, but you still get your money and I don't get mine. How does that make any damn sense? And they always attach the measure for defunding to some bill that nobody's actually going to pass. I mean, they crooked. They are so crooked. So we need to clean house, whether that's a brand new Congress or whatever folks need to do. We need to clean house, and we need to make sure, and no, that doesn't mean that the quote unquote good people in Congress get cleaned out too, but we do need to put, everybody needs to get put on notice. Either you get in line, you know what I'm saying, you be about the people, or you won't, your behind's gone. I mean, that's what's real. Caller, how are you? Where are you calling from? What's your name? And what's your comment or question?
Hi, this is Dita from San Leandro. Hi, Anoa.
Hi, how are you?
Okay, I would like to step back a little bit to the other night with Ben's show about the choice equivalence of between Hillary and Trump. Okay. And Ben, to me, the conversation was based on, to me, using the narrative and the talking points which mainstream media uses in terms of saying that we hate Hillary and versus Trump. You know, the reason why if you vote for Trump is because you hate Hillary, or you know. But what I would like to say that I'm not going to vote for neither one of them because I could do that in California. Because to me, I don't.
Right.
I'm not going to serve two masters, because to me they're very much too similar in the way that they their characteristics and their track record and what they have presented. And as far as we were talking about tonight about race, when it comes to race, even though everybody focuses on Donald Trump, what comes out of his mouth and some of his history, but to me, I think it's more damaging when it comes to the overall policies throughout the decades of how policy and law is made in terms of affecting the Black population in this country since the time we arrived here, how it's set up. And also when in terms of how we describe the discrimination in the polls in terms of criminalization and criminal justice. There's a great book by Dr. Khalil Muhammad that he done about how data lies. And it goes back and looks at how data is presented to make a point for a particular narrative that you want, an outcome that you have. And it's a great book, and it goes back and look at the criminalization of Black people in America with the police. And the one thing that I like to say about first moving forward and as being progressive, that we have to take a look at ourselves in terms of the language that we use. See, we have to understand the play on language and words, how it drives the point, and how it's used to move forward a narrative when you see it like across the board when it's presented in like the mainstream media, because we got 6 corporations that is putting out the propaganda and controlling the airways in which how we get our messages out and who gets to tell the messages. And even though we have the podcasts like yours and Ben's and several others, but the Black media is gone now. There's no more Black media. It's been sold out, bought out, and not in the ones that are in the media as African Americans. They're just servers trying to make their paycheck, to pay their bills, because they just follow suit. They don't have a real true voice, so they'll go out and say anything that white supremacist corporations tell them to say in order to keep their job, even though it hurts the community at large. So I think that as progressives, we need to really look at our messages. I'm sorry to cut you off for a second, but I just wanted at one point you just made about Black media. Shout out to Yvette Brown with Breaking Brown. I know. She's great. I watch her. Yeah, well, she made. What I was going to say, she made a great convert. She made a great. There's a piece. There's a. I think there's a video she's done too. But we were all at a conference, the People Summit in Chicago, and that was what she said. There was a progressive media panel, basically, and that's exactly what she talked about, was the lack of representation and support for progressive. For the segment of progressive Black media doesn't exist. So yeah, definitely. Yeah, so I think it's like Dr. Boyce Watkins just did a thing in Atlanta, all Black conference that tried to focus more on the economic component of the Black community, because for me, I don't care too much for this intersectional word conversation that to build movies to intersect when we have a problem with our own Black community. To me, we need to build this intersectionality between these different groups and different issues. There's some straight issues that we must totally focus on, and they have to get on board with us for the things that are affecting our lives detrimentally more than any other group across the categories. Because we're top in so many categories: unemployment, discrimination, death, the justice system. The water crisis. And you look at the towns in which it affected, and President Obama goes there and holds up a clear glass of water and says it's okay to drink the water. That is just so demeaning, The same thing happened to us in West Virginia. It was disgusting. That is so sad, and then we don't call them out because we want, the Black Caucus. We have to take a look at them because, I was watching the Black Caucus, and they had a panel on saying about a Latino panel saying that how we need to integrate their issues with ours so we can get ahead. But that never works for us. When we start integrating and claiming intersectionality, we wind up don't even stand up for our own issues that affect us. They won't even go to bat for justice. Even look at the police categories with Loretta Lynch. All she got to do is add Excel, another damn column in there to collect data, which is already stated in the in the law that said that she has to collect the data, but she doesn't enforce it. Right.
I definitely
talking to Chuck Todd on Atlanta Forum one, and Chuck Todd asked her. She started freaking laughing. I didn't think it was funny at all. And then we pushed to get her in office. It's too many coons. You got to weave out the coons.
Most definitely, and I definitely appreciate you trying again and getting through tonight. Definitely. I don't know if you emailed me yet, but definitely email me because I do want to get with you to talk some more. But I only had the channel for a little bit longer, so I'm gonna have to cut you right here. But I definitely appreciate what you've added to the conversation tonight, and definitely email me thewayofanoa@gmail.com so we can continue the conversation some more because I would like to get some more of your thoughts on this topic and some other stuff too. So I appreciate you very much for calling in. That was a perfect segue actually into the conversation I want to have. So definitely shout out to the sister because she tried to call in yesterday, but I had also been off air. I don't think she got in through when we were on with Ben last night. So kudos, definitely. If any of you guys though, seriously, if you don't get in like during either my show, Ben's show, or any of our other shows, definitely check out. I'm gonna tweet it out again. Your podcast is one of the brilliant projects, brainchild of Michael Solomon of Progressive Army and Media Revolt. Podcast Revolution. We got a whole conglomeration of stuff going on here. But your podcast is for you. It's for you to, you can call in, you can leave us a message and we'll take your comments, we'll take your commentary, your rants, and we're going to turn that into a podcast, representative of you, your voice, and what's going on. And because we need to listen to the voices across. We talk about these progressive movements and allies, and what the sister was just speaking to in terms of I was talking with one of my colleagues earlier today, Dr. Trisha Callender. She's a political consultant, political strategist with her own organization. She Spanner Strategies, totally went mind blank real quick. But we were talking about how this issue of integration versus equality. And I think the comment that was raised about this intersectionality, I don't think it's the intersectionality and acknowledging it so much. I don't think that's what's bad, but I do agree that there are these attempts at times to integrate ideas that we kind of give way and don't push, the most needed aspects of our agenda. Equality and integration are not exactly the same thing. And we need to keep equality and equity. Some people would say equity rather than equality. We need to keep those things at the forefront of the conversation, equitable action at the forefront of our conversations. We talk about kind of coming together. I wanted to read something just to start off. If you don't already follow her on Twitter, and don't start harassing this woman, and don't tell. And if you were asshole, don't tell her I sent you. But she's definitely a great wealth of knowledge. She's someone I follow. I don't know if she knows I'm a fan of hers, but Kirsten West Savali, she writes for. She's an associate. I think she's associate editor, social justice writer for The Root. But she had this great post up earlier today from James Baldwin. James Baldwin wrote this for The Nation, July 11th, 1966. This is an excerpt from a piece he wrote. It says, "Now what I have said about Harlem is true of Chicago, Detroit, Washington, Boston, Philadelphia, Los Angeles, and San Francisco. It's true of every northern city with a large Negro population. And the police are simply the hired enemies of this population. They are present to keep the Negro in his place and to protect white business interests, and they have no other function. They are, moreover, even in a country which makes the very grave error of equating ignorance with simplicity, quite stunningly ignorant. And since they know that they are hated, they are always afraid. One cannot possibly arrive at a more surefire formula for cruelty. This is why those pious calls to respect the law always to be heard from prominent citizens each time the ghetto explodes are so obscene. The law is meant to be my servant, not my master, still less my torturer and my murderer. To respect the law in the context in which the American Negro finds himself is simply to surrender his self-respect. Now, I've had conversations with folks, particularly one of my colleagues, Courtney Richardson. Courtney writes a lot about, economics, finance, things of that nature. But we've been talking a lot about what we've been seeing, particularly in this, the explosion of activism around so many different areas. And I mean, obviously we're too young to have the knowledge of the 60s, but it seems from everything that we've learned and seen in documentaries that this is like 66, 68. I feel like we are in another, everyone says it's a movement moment. Things happen in cycles, right? And that piece from that excerpt from James Baldwin applies today. He could have written it, someone could have written that same exact piece, of course, absent the word Negro, but it could have been written today, right? And this gets to the conversation Ben and I were having last night when we started talking about, the nuance and how politicians are addressing this issue of race. Definitely check out my podcast with Dr. Tricia Calendar, because one of the points she made earlier was that race is conflated often with crime and criminal justice issues and does not talk about the myriad of other problems, that exist in America. And it allows people to get off into these other conversations about respect and proper behavior, and it doesn't actually even address, the real underlying root causes. As I've mentioned before, respect is not reason to take someone's life. It's not reason for a lot of things. That's not, respect is not even the actual issue. It's code language, and it's a weak justification for the mistreatment that disproportionately befalls Black, men and women and youth. I wanted to talk about, I was sitting here thinking about what stories I was going to cover tonight. One of the things that came up to Ben and I through a thread we're on was Councilman Jumaane Williams, brother, please forgive me if I mispronounce your first name. Absolutely have been a fan of this man since I first learned of his existence during the primary. He's a councilman from Brooklyn. And he was one of the few in New York that actually gave Bernie Sanders, from what I observed, the time of day. If you recall the housing, the public housing tour Bernie Sanders did when he went to New York, Jumaane was Councilman Williams was a huge part of that, and that directly led to what we saw later on, released by the Sanders campaign, the affordable housing platform that came out of that. But he is a tireless champion of the people, of the community. Talking about Councilman Williams right now, and I believe it's been 2 weeks now. He sat down during the pledge. He stopped saying he didn't stand, and he said in a piece I read earlier that he had stopped. He hasn't said the pledge. He doesn't say the pledge. Like myself and many others, I mean, we may have stood out of deference, what I'm saying, but we don't actually say the pledge. But he was saying that, basically inspired by Colin Kaepernick's protest, he sat down. He sat down, and once that news spread, he has received and been targeted with all types of hate mail. The language I'm not going to repeat, but it's been excruciating in terms of the response to someone who has been a tireless champion of the people. And he had a statement today. He held a press conference today, and he said, it's all types of stuff that was said to him, but he said that I'll remain seated in an act of solidarity and patriotism. Well, this wasn't him. I'm sorry. This is another councilman, because what ended up happening is now there are 7 other council members who have now joined his protests in city council. So, but Councilman Brad Lander said that I'll remain seated in an act of solidarity and patriotism. He's another Democrat from Brooklyn. He said, I'm sorry if it's in any way offensive to my constituents, but surely it is far less offensive than receiving vile hate mail or being worried about whether or not your teenage son is going to come home at night. Like I said, Councilman Williams has received untold amount of vile hate mail. He's being attacked on Twitter, on social media, personally. It's not, and Councilman Antonio Reynoso said he'd also sent out the pledge until the country begins a real conversation regarding race and injustice. Another Democrat from Brooklyn. He said, I know we can do better. I expect better from this country. So they're just going down the list of, there are several council folks who are supporting him. Carlos Menchaca from Brooklyn, Rafael Espinal and Inez Barron, also of Brooklyn, Andy King of the Bronx, and Ruben Willis of Queens have also agreed to support and stand with Councilman Williams. Well, rather sit with Councilman Williams in this protest. But you know, it's interesting as we're seeing this, because one of the things I've said, like, okay, yeah, people are raising the fist or whatever. I'm gonna admit, I was initially dismissive because it's like, okay, great, everyone's protesting, big deal. But to see the spread, to see people willing to take a stand and put their reputation on the line for what they believe in, it's contagious. It's a beautiful thing. But these are people who are actually committed to their actual communities. These are public servants. These are people who are actually already engaging and doing the work and committed to doing even more and going even further, who are committed to leading by example, right? And not just paying lip service in their words. And since following Councilman Williams, you know, since looking, you know, at him during the primary race and stuff, just to see the type of person and character that he is. Like, we talk about, you know, why am I talking about this in Race in America? Because, you know, this is a Black man, and I could not tell, but in the picture that I saw when he sat down, it looked like he was in prayer position. I do not know if he is Muslim, but it looks, from what I've seen, when I've observed my stepfather praying before. So I don't know if that's an element of the hate and intolerance that he's received as well. I could be incorrect there. Don't hold me to that. That is an observation I saw from a photo. But when we have people who are willing, the language that's being used at Collin, for example, right? The language that's being used at Councilman Williams and others who decide to take a stand and raise their voices. I saw a tweet from Bill Mayer. I guess he's upset because of things Collin had to say regarding Hillary Clinton. And it was very, it wasn't just hateful and dismissive. It was like peak, you know, liberal white supremacy gone wrong. How can a liberal be a white supremacist? I mean, white supremacy is not, you know, beholden unto any type of personal ideology. It's just in the fact that, you know, you white, so you think you know better and you're going to impose your judgment on everybody else. So I do think that there is a need to have a conversation. It's not an easy conversation. It's a painful conversation. And it doesn't have to be a conversation like, well, you white, you wrong. But we do have to have a very real conversation of race in America and how different, similar situated people have very different experiences. And you can say, well, everybody has different experiences, Anoa, but there are commonalities that we experience on the basis of race that are not just general, everybody experiences differences. I mean, like I've said before, we have issues with race being just ingrained and entrenched in the fiber and fabric of every aspect of American life. And it's impossible to continue to ignore the way hatred on the basis of race, and might not be overtly hatred, but it's definitely ingrained in the socialization that people have undergone in this country. Is definitely ingrained in the way organizations, the way government agencies have been acting. When you look at the old policies of the Federal Highway Administration, not Federal Highway Administration, sorry, the Federal Housing, got my acronyms mixed up, Federal Housing Administration, with the way that segregation was actually incentivized by the federal government in many areas. When you had the building of new housing and you had the creation of the suburbs, you know, they were white-only communities. And these were funded and supported by the federal government. These were GI dollars being put to work. I mean, you look at the practice of redlining. You know, you look at people who might have lived in integrated communities at one point in time in the earlier part of last century, but when you had the creation and formulation of this Federal Housing Authority, if you were in certain neighborhoods, you could not get funds. So it forced people to leave those avenues and enclaves that they were maybe already a part of and comfortable with, because you otherwise could not get funds to do so. We've seen this happen with education. We've seen this happen in so many different areas, and it continues to happen. It may not be as blatant as it once was, but it continues to happen because these policies, these procedures, these attributes of these organizations, of these agencies has not changed. These people were trained by the same, you know, it has not changed. Nothing has been done to atone, to address. I mean, we ain't even had no truth and reconciliation like they did in South Africa. Not that that made everything any better, but at least, you know, you get it all out there and on the record. We haven't even had that much happen. So there's still, when we come forward to today, we talk about not just the police violence issue, even though that is a huge issue. When we talk about disparities, there was a piece earlier today about how even preschool teachers, preschool teachers do have inherent biases and treat Black and white children differently at the preschool level. And this piece was talking about how they have to work to overcome their implicit biases, because they were looking at how, Black youth are exponentially more likely to be suspended, right? Who the hell suspends a 3-year-old, a 4-year-old? What are you suspending them for? Not laying down at nap time? There was another piece, I think, I talked about this a little bit last night, the ACLU and youth, incarcerated youth being overly put in solitary confinement for extended periods of time for minor issues. Like the one young lady in one piece, she talked too loud. Not that she was, screaming, yelling, doing anything, divisive or violent or whatever. She spoke in a voice too loud. Someone else was singing when they were supposed to be quiet. And for that, they were in solitary confinement for extended periods of time. These are issues that are disproportionately borne out on people of color generally and on Black people particularly. And it's a problem. You can trace a lot of these policies, programs, and methods of dealing with folks back to a certain time and certain era, and that has yet to be addressed. And it must be addressed going forward. We cannot have not just another election cycle where it's like, oh yes, I love the Black people kissing babies. Let me get Pusha T to come and tell you people about let me get Mary J to come sing a song for me. No, we need better. And not that we need better, we demand better. But we also have to be comfortable. And it's not just, we have to be comfortable. If you are a quote unquote white ally, someone who identifies and wants to help, look into organizations like Surge. Like I was talking with a friend of mine, she was talking about how, she didn't feel necessarily welcome at a local organization that was trying to work with certain issues. I told her, I said, you should look and see if there's a Surge chapter. Surge is standing up for racial justice. I got to look it up real quick because I could be butchering that acronym. But Surge is basically a white-led organization for racial justice. And we need people to create chapters. We need people, we do need people to make a change and organize where they are and with who they're with. And Surge actually showing up, standing up, showing up for racial justice. It's a national network of groups and individuals organizing white people for racial justice. Through community organizing, mobilizing, education. I absolutely encourage people to reach out and find out more, see if there's a chapter in your area. If not, consider starting one. We need people to handle this conversation and fight where they are, where it applies to them. The other thing, I kind of wanted to lead into what happened with brother Alfred Olango. Hopefully I'm pronouncing. I try my best. But he was murdered in California yesterday. His sister, and everyone says, oh, you shouldn't call the police. We've heard this conversation. People call the police to help them address the situation because that's what your first inclination is, right? You think you should be able to call the police to address this stuff. But unfortunately, there are far too many situations where, if you have someone, particularly in this case, where, from what I've seen reported, he had a seizure. And he was distressed. And from the work I've done, having read a little bit about seizures, and I'm not going to pretend like I actually know everything there is to know about seizures. I'm not a medical professional, but people can come out of them disoriented. There can be some frustrations and other issues going along. But when she called this area, they actually have a provision for handling people who are physically or mentally distressed in some way. And for whatever reason, that was not activated. They sent the police instead. And I think it's called a 5150. That information was conveyed to the police. So they knew what type of situation they were arriving to when they arrived. There are far too many instances when the police are called to handle someone who is mentally, emotionally, or otherwise distressed or incapacitated, and they end up either harming them further or actually killing them. And there is a need to have a conversation about how we handle not just responding to people who might have some type of mental, emotional, physical, some type of distress, right? Because think about it, just think about being distressed in just your regular life, right? Like you're not necessarily thinking clearly, just even think about just a moment in time when when something just has happened, whether, you lost your train of thought, you're just real simple, on a real simple level, right? If you get distracted, you get distressed, it happens to the best of us. It happens to all of us at some point in time. You're not necessarily, like, my kids would be like, mom. I mean, again, this is a very simplistic example, but at the same time, it is not inconceivable by any stretch of imagination that somehow in the moment of being a distressed person, you're not necessarily paying attention to the fact that somebody is trying to give you commands. That is probably actually the worst thing you can do in that scenario to somebody. And the fact that they were put on notice. There was a brilliant series of tweets I saw before I got on, and it talked about how we need to stop requiring police to do more. We expect police to be social workers, mental health service providers, all this whole long list of things they're supposed to be able to do, instead of actually providing funding to properly handle and address such situations. Police don't need more training upon training upon training. They just need to not be doing it, because it's clearly not within their capabilities to be doing so. Now, is it to say that no police officer ever has been able to deal with? No, because there was another incident I saw earlier. A white man had a gun, waving a gun around. They were able to call in a negotiator and another provider and someone else, and they were able, several hours later, they were able to get everything resolved. There's a picture floating around of Alfred with the two cops moments before he's shot, that's been released by the police officers, and it looks as if he is holding a gun. Apparently, he wasn't holding a gun. He didn't have a weapon of any kind. And again, this man was distressed. He had a seizure reportedly. He was distressed. They ended his life. No damn reason. And when these incidences happen, instead of the police department, instead of the police taking the onus, taking responsibility and accountability for what went wrong, what they did wrong, whether intentionally or unintentionally, instead of that happening, they do dumb shit like releasing pictures that look like someone is armed and dangerous, as if they had no choice. Because what do they want to do? They want to convince you, Joe Q public, that they were justified in their action. Or they release information to news media outlets weeks after, someone has been killed, like with Keith Lamont Scott. They'll release information that this person might have had a domestic violence charge, or this person once upon a time had a gun charge, or this person might have been smoking a joint. That is not information that you yourself knew, unless that was a factor in what happened at that moment in that given time. It's absolutely irrelevant. It's not relevant, because only thing that matters is what was known to the cops at the time they did what they did. All this extraneous, extemporaneous, all this other BS is just that. It's BS. Now, we got to continue to push back these false narratives. We got to continue to do our part to drive not just drive the conversation, because we've been talking about this. Like, I just read you a piece from James Baldwin from 50 years ago. 50 years ago. And the same damn thing applies today. We've been talking a long time. So I go back to my comments in response to Bryce's question. We need to be active and engaged in our communities. We need to be voting, because it is our city councils, it is our mayoral candidates. You look at how your municipality is arranged. Who is making the decision making? Who is making these higher level police hires? What person makes that decision, and how are they elected? Is your sheriff, is he appointed? Is he elected? Look at their track records. These are cases, if we look at the state, yes, do we need some national, federal, guidance and movement? Yes, of course. That's going to take a lot of time. But there's stuff that we can do at the local level. There are cases that we can address at the local level and push and demand accountability and action. But we also need to be clear about what we're specifically asking for, what that looks like, what we're demanding, and how we want it. We can't leave it up to these people over there that don't give a damn about us anyway to making that decision. And yes, I'm talking about what's been affecting predominantly Black communities, but at the same time, let's be real. For everybody who says, well, they kill white people too, then you know what? You need to get up off your ass and get moving in your community and make sure that stuff stops, because it's not right. It's absolutely not right. Human life is valuable, it's sacred. And like I said, I've said it before, I'm not going to sit here and pretend like there has never been any situation ever in life where it was necessary to use some type of force. I'm not going to say that. But what I will say, in these situations that do pop up, your response should not be, well, they do it to other people too. It's not right. It's not right. It's illegal. It needs to be addressed as such. So we're going to continue having this conversation over the next several weeks. Starting Friday, we will have our first Progressive Army panel addressing police violence and systemic racism. We will tweet out, the information and stuff like that. Got a great line of panelists set up for you guys. I will be moderating. Yay, more of me. Aren't you excited? My panels are pretty sweet, so you definitely need to check it out. But this is a conversation we got to keep having, and I'm like I said, shout out again to Councilman Williams and the other 7 council people who are standing with him in solidarity and addressing these issues. Definitely, like I said, check the brother out, follow him on Twitter, check some of the other council people out, follow them as well, because they need our support. I mean, it doesn't matter that we're not among their constituents. People need support because these are hard times we're facing. I'm not going to necessarily say this is exactly like the 60s. I can't say that because I wasn't there. But I do know that history repeats itself. I do know that things happen in cycles. That is well documented. And I do know that we are in for a rough ride. Don't matter who's at the top of the ticket, but vote. You need a vote. You need a vote. You need a vote. You need a vote. And I think that the message from Jesse Williams about voting and getting involved in the process, I think it's absolutely consistent with everything we say here at the Benjamin Dixon Show, Progressive Army, The Way with Noah. I think it's absolutely consistent with everything that Dr. Glaude has talked and written about in terms of the blank out vote. I'm not worried about the top of the ticket. What I'm worried about is the down ballots. I'm worried about people like Jesse Smith from Alabama getting the support they need to turn the tide, to be in Congress, to be an advocate and champion of the people. I'm worried. You know what I'm saying? I'm worried. No, that's what I'm concerned about. That's what I want to see. But I need you to help and talk to your friends and family. I know some of us got Trump supporters in the family, things like that. I know I'm going over. I'm sorry, David. I'm going over for just real quick, and then I'm about to cut out. It boggles my mind that we can have people who are so deathly afraid of Trump, but they will support equally bad candidates at the local level. Whether it's your governor race, like in West Virginia with alleged Democrat Jim Justice. I almost called him Jim Jones. He looks a little scary. As opposed to the Mountain Party candidate, Charlotte Pritt, who is the Green Party state affiliate for West Virginia. You guys definitely, if you're green, even if you're not green, if you just believe in supporting progressive candidates, go check out Charlotte Pritt for governor for West Virginia. She that's somebody who needs to be boosted and lifted up as well. So there's a lot of people out there. Please continue to continue to send me information about good progressive candidates, because as much as we can get shine and light, if you do any writing, write op-eds, write letters to the editor. If you can, whatever you can do a lot more. That's the one thing I keep saying it to you. That's the one thing that we definitely got from the Bernie Sanders movement over the past year. That can't nobody take away from us. We have the power, the energy, determination, and the wherewithal to make it happen. We just got to do it. So I appreciate you all for hanging in tonight. Definitely join us Friday night at 8 p.m. Eastern time. We'll be having a panel. We're going to have several more panels after that. We're definitely, still working on lining folks up. Appreciate you guys for hanging in there with me tonight. So I'm going to leave you with a closing quote. Actually, Alicia Garza, one of the co-founders of Black Lives Matter, is speaking, or she was speaking this evening at the University of Chicago. And I just saw some tweets earlier, just talking about, her speaking engagement, stuff like that. But I saw a really great quote from her that I wanted to read because, like I said, it was powerful. This is my closing quote, and then we're out. Change will happen when everyday people govern our communities. When politics is not a career, it's a responsibility. So I absolutely agree with that. Change happens when we make it happen, when we decide that we're going to rise up from the ranks and demand better consistently over time. So I appreciate you guys for hanging in there. Thank you so much. Subscribe to the Benjamin Dixon Show channel. Go check me out on The Way with Anoa on my YouTube channel, thewayofanoa.com, for other podcasts and stuff. I do 2 to 3 a week in addition to my show. And without you, we can't do this. So however you can contribute, share, help, get at us. All right. Peace.
The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog, join the Progressive Army, and support the Benjamin Dixon Show.
It's Ben Dixon!
If you like this episode, be sure to share, like, and subscribe.